She actually does it. Carlos nodded with understanding, almost as if he knew that the mother of the bride had an advanced degree in geometry that had been gathering dust for the past 30 years while she reared her brood and supported the career of her automobile CEO husband, and that she had chosen to channel her intellectual frustrations into the anal retentive micromanagement of her eldest daughter's wedding. Of course, Carlos knew none of this, but having been in the business for decades, he didn't need the specifics to understand the importance of executing the task at hand with precision. The wedding of a rich person also had, at least for the workers involved, the looming possibility of litigation hovering in the near future. Not rich people's events had forgettable glitches. Gaffes to the ultra-wealthy were unforgivable grievances that only the courts could remedy. A recent tale of a florist in fiscal ruin because she substituted an Ecuadorian rose for an English one after her shipment was stuck in customs had struck a nerve. Everyone, from the delivery guy to the wedding officiant, was on their toes. Now listen, Olga continued. These were custom-made just for the wedding, and the bride wants to have them for her house. What's she gonna do with 300 napkins? One of the waiters interjected. He was clearly new. 600, actually, Olga offered. Always good to have extras, right? The staff laughed. She claims they'll be heirlooms. Point is, we need to be sure that we keep these separate from the rented linens at the end of the night. Got it? The waiters collectively nodded, and, like a colony of ants given orders from their queen, ran off to execute the said napkin plan. Olga did some mental math. It would take 6 pairs of hands another 4 hours to create an optic that the guests would undo in seconds with the flick of a wrist. 290 guests, to be exact. Barring a crazy incident, some overgrown frat boy spraying the bridesmaids with champagne, say, or a drunken guest knocking over the croquembouche display, they should end the night with between 150 and 175 brand new, beautiful linen hem-stitched napkins that she could take for her cousin Mabel to use at her wedding that fall. Olga hated her cousin Mabel. Of course, it hadn't always been this way. Yes, Mabel had been a loudmouth girl who developed into a loudmouth know-it-all woman, but despite this, they had been, in their youth, quite close. Slowly, though, a rift had formed and expanded. Then, last year, at age 39, Mabel was concurrently promoted to mid-level management at Con Edison and proposed to by her long-term boyfriend. The combination rendered her insufferable. Olga was only a year or so older, and for the entirety of their lives, Mabel had been in a one-sided competition with her where action of any sort in Olga's life was interpreted by Mabel as a sign of aggression and met with a, "So you think you're better than me, huh?" Truth be told, for most of their lives, using a traditional American metric for measuring success, Olga was better than Mabel. Olga had left Sunset Park, gone to a fancy college, started her business, had been featured in magazines and on TV, had traveled the world, and gone to dinners costlier than one of Mabel's paychecks. But now, with this engagement, Mabel was going to achieve something Olga never had: being a bride. Never mind that Olga bristled at the idea of third dates, let alone marriage. To Mabel, in this one arena, she had finally won, and she was not about to let her victory go unnoticed. On Christmas Eve, drunk on coquito, she waved her engagement ring in Olga's face, repeatedly saying, "Julio got it from Jared's bitch. What did you get? That's right, nothing." At the bridal shower that her family pressured her to host because she's the one with all the party hookups, Mabel gave a special toast to her cousin Olga, who can help the brides. She just can't get a groom. Olga had taken this in stride. Primarily because if finding someone like Julio to be tied to for all eternity was the one contest she would lose to Mabel, then she had chosen well. She was equally placated knowing that, when the time was right, she would think of the perfect fuck you gesture to take just a bit of wind out of Mabel's sails on her wedding day. Just the right little something to be the pebble in her shoe when she reflected on the day. It was during her 6th meeting with Mrs. Henderson, the mother of today's bride, specifically about the topic of napkins, when the idea came to her, and she was immediately filled with delight, knowing that she could strike 2 birds with one tiny stone. From the beginning, Olga knew the napkins were going to be the thing with this event. At every first meeting with a client, there was one comment casually uttered that Olga filed in her mental Rolodex, knowing that in several months' time, she would spend hours or even collective days dealing with what had been a seemingly innocuous statement or question. So it was.